I think. Somebody tell me if it's working, or I'll check.
Says public
Do a
voice.
refreshing.
Yep. It is now live.
It's just coming up now with a commercial.
Okay, I want to make sure. Because if it's this, then I know it's the Wi-Fi.
It's up.
All right, great.
Yeah, Wi-Fi is generally bad. If someone tries to put some coffee or something in the microwave, you have to contend with that too.
Yeah, I don't think streaming and Wi-Fi really mix. It's a really bad setup.
Yeah, not yet.
Okay.
It's coming through. It's coming through. All right.
Well, so that's great. Now we know the problem is. It's Wi-Fi. It's not.
Because streaming is a lot more sensitive to things like collision and packet loss and all that stuff. And from what I can tell, you're pretty much pushing your router way beyond what it's capable of.
All right. Well, let's talk about whatever you guys want to talk about now. Call it a free day, casual day.
Well, we had some funny talks. Oh, we just got an install running of Eve Echoes, and it definitely has one problem, and that is it is not playable on an actual mobile phone, in my opinion, because you can't read anything. It's like fucking micro script. Like, how can you read anything on this screen? It's nice resolution and stuff looks really good. It's like I just can't say I can't tell what any of the writing actually says unless I start using magnifier glass in front of my actual phone. It's like it's ridiculous, but it's definitely really popular on the emulators. It works really well.
I
You
heard
mentioned
the small
font
text.
size, and that's when the iPhone came out and there's the bigger version, the smaller version. I was asking my wife, like, why are people getting a bigger version? I like having a small phone. Now I understand.
Yeah, I've been using Eve Echoes since yesterday afternoon.
I heard
And I'm strictly on mobile, and it's once you get used to the UI, it's a lot easier than you realize. The only thing that does need work is the chat system. It's not the easiest to chat to people because obviously it is mobile, but it is still usable on a mobile, in my opinion. It does depend though on how big of a phone you have. I do have an S10 Plus, so it is large.
How's the manual piloting?
it's fine. I mean, I'm playing it on an emulator, but still. I heard that the small text was actually like a technical issue. Like, I was reading the bug reports, and apparently,
No,
it's not.
if you have like an advanced pilot that tried to manual pilot in Echoes, would they be like, okay, I can do something, or I can't accomplish anything?
It is better. There are a couple of settings that are enabled by default that I don't particularly enjoy. Some of these are very useful for a mobile-based game, though. One of them is when you are firing your weapons, it orbits at the optimal of your weapon, which is quite a useful thing for those that aren't quick reactions, quick on fingers, and being able to do certain things. Quite easy to do missions when you just target something, it automatically sets the orbit. That overrides any manual piloting, which is an issue when you are trying to keep transversal up, for example. But when you turn that setting off, there is no real difficulty in manual piloting. It's quite easy to use once you have gotten over that initial usage hurdle. I don't have any issue keeping something at range with transversal or approaching an angle thing.
And I think there's also been a few reports that chat is a little bit balked, and I was told that they are actually running external service, so it's an Amazon-based one, but they want to in-house it eventually. But that's apparently causing a bit of lag issues as well.
Chat is hard to use on an emulator. It's kind of broken, but it still works. You just have to like click on it like once, and you won't be able to see what you type. And then once you hit send, you'll see the message come up. So that wasn't an issue during the beta. So I hope it gets fixed somehow.
So
Yeah, but I was
when do
referring to
we-
the server issues.
when do we see a desktop client?
They've said
I-
that a desktop client is not going to be supported.
I will bet you money they're going to end up making it some sort of client for PC.
We
I
talked about
hope.
this before the show, that emulators are a way that mobile games can have a presence on a desktop without the game company actually investing design time and hours to creating multi-platform clients. I do think eventually that's where technology is going. The multi-platform sort of games, the players want it, and some companies are stepping forward to do it.
Well, it's basically, if I'm not mistaken, I was told that one of the emulators being used is actually developed by NetEase. So I think it's valid that some sort of collaboration will arise between NetEase and CCP to actually make a pure client for PC. I think that is the direction that everything is going to move eventually. That you're going to have these standalone platforms that can pretty much spread out the load, right? And I think that's also what we're going to see with the development of the platform for EVE Online, right? The little client for doing your market stuff and your character sheets and all that stuff.
Question in chat: what's a good emulator? And I don't know the answer to that. Does anyone know that one?
I've been using
iPhone,
BlueStacks
Android?
and it works okay.
Yeah, people have had
BlueStacks
problems installing on it.
BlueStacks is the standard. That's what is generally used for stuff of this sort.
Yeah.
Which platform?
That works on Windows. I would caution anyone who is running Hyper-V on their Windows machine against using any sort of mobile device emulation. It will crash your machine.
So to confirm, BlueStacks will work for both iPhone and Android users on Windows?
Well, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the LD player is a NetEase product, and I've heard that actually works better with Eve Echoes.
I tried LD player and it was super slow compared to BlueStacks, but that was just me.
BlueStacks is an Android emulator, so it'll emulate an Android environment. You can install the Android app and use it as if you owned an Android device.
By the way, all these emulators are not for iOS, right?
Correct.
I don't remember the iPhone emulator.
So if you have an iPhone, you can't really put that on your screen.
So you're not putting your Android phone on your screen. You're putting a
broadcast,
a virtual Android phone on your screen. You're creating one out of nothing. So it's like you can have a free virtual Android phone whether you own an Android device or not. It doesn't really matter. If you're doing it for the game, then it doesn't matter what platform you're emulating. You're just doing it for the game.
Oh, so my phone number is an iPhone. Is tied to an iPhone device. I can still use BlueStacks with an Android as an emulator.
Yeah, it's a free virtual Android device.
Yeah, there's 3 emulators being used right now, primarily, right? There's the BlueStacks and LD, the LD player, and then there's Mumu. It's actually Mumu that's a NetEase product,
Nox. Right? Nox is another emulator that people are using for this.
Mm-hmm.
Just so I just want to reiterate, feel free to use an emulator and feel free to expect it to work, but it is unsupported. This is not the intended method of access for this product. So defects in quality can and will happen because of this.
Yeah. Also, do note that some emulators do trigger antivirus warnings, so please do use them at your own discretion.
Memu Play is also. I'm also using Memu Play for Echoes, and it's actually not that bad either.
Right. How much money did you guys all spend first day on Echo?
I have
0.
spent 30 Great British pounds.
30? I spent 15. I got Alpha.
I got Alpha, and then I bought some of them for the increased training, and that allowed me to get Market up and running, which I now have all 3 training implants.
Did you get them?
Yeah, I've got all 3 now. I
Like,
bought one with in-game currency.
do you remember learning implants and the very first thing you were told to do
Oh,
train your skills?
yeah, I remember starting up on Eve, and the advice that you got from, because normally you'd start with someone or you'd end up chatting to someone, and it was train these skills and then go away for a month. Then you come
Yeah.
back and then you can enjoy the game.
But this is very
It
similar,
was-
right?
It was the standard. Not so much, because they're equivalent to an implant. So in Echoes, they have these little tokens that you can use that will automatically apply your skills. When you're doing the training, you get these tokens. If you already have trained the skills at that point, you do get skill points refunded. But basically, they are just a level 5 skill that you can't get. So it's their equivalent of an implant using the same system. Which
It's just funny that they revive something like, well, almost like learning skills, and they also revive alarm clocking, right? Because if you're on an alpha account, you only have a 24-hour training queue. That means that you're basically going to be alarm clocking, and it's going to skill queue empty, and you're going to have to sit there and fix it.
for the record, it is the same for Omega. There is a 24-hour skill queue, period.
Really? I thought it was infinite on Omega.
Nope.
Wow, so we've got alarm clocking on both. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But there is some microtransactions in here that are obviously not present. Most notably being that there are 2 currencies, Aurum and Plex. Aurum is what you are able to purchase with real life money. Plex is what you're able to purchase with in-game. So they have separated out to the neuroscience gift pack, which are these skills, which are the injectable ones. They are only purchasable with real life money. So if you see any on market, that is someone who has bought them and has put them on market.
Is it real alarm clocking where you can only have 1 skill training at a time, or is it that you can't go beyond 24 hours and you can just you have a
It's a time-based limit, so you cannot go beyond 24 hours. So I, for example, have got 7 skills queued up, with the last skill being a 51-hour skill. So I'll train through the normal ones, and then if I happen to not be able to get online, then I will start training that 51-hour skill, which is still useful. But I am trying to maximize the smaller skills while still
So
having.
that's your catch-all. You just have that
Yeah.
at the end in case you can't get to it.
Yeah, and that's what I'd recommend anyone who is playing Echoes. If you do notice you can't add another skill because you are over by a few minutes, remove the last skill and put a catch-all one, so that if you don't realize it in X amount of time that you forgot to add on skills, then you have a catch one, so you are not lost on training.
I want to draw a difference between the alarm clocking comment in the old Eve Online. You can only have 1 skill at a time. So if it ended at 3 a.m, you had the alarm clock at 3 a.m. and put your next skill in. This is not that. This is you can change and add another skill when you're in that final 24 hours. So you don't really need to alarm clock. You just you have a 24-hour period where you can then add another skill unless you're doing the tactic you mentioned.
One interesting note I have seen since playing Echoes is the emergence of the market hubs has come into full effect. There are more market systems. So in Echoes, they have designated market stations for interstellar deliveries, regional deliveries, and just they're generally a market station. They have a different icon than the others, and they have a different model. I have noticed the emergence of the standard Eve stations, which is Jita, is currently is where I am, and there is a maximum of 1,000 pilots in that system, and Jita has pretty much been at that maximum for the last 6 hours. So there's a queue forming in perimeter of about 700 players, all trying to get into Jita. So with the main trade hubs being Jita, MR, Heck, Rens, and Dodixie, those 5, they are beginning to bulk out with stuff, but it's not limited to that.
So one thing I heard early on is people were starting in systems and there was always like 200 people in their system, even when they traveled around. Do you think they're spreading the population out?
He is suicide gank on the way. The people waiting to get into Jita.
So suicide ganking at the moment isn't prevalent because there is no way to cargo scan. There are features in EVE that are not present in the game just because of the infancy of the game. Most notably is there are no combat scanners. There are low sec aggression timers, me being the lovely pirate I am. If you attack a player in low sec and you get in range of a gate gun, the gate gun will shoot you regardless, which is different than current EVE mechanics. It's how I lost my first ship. So there are a large amount of differences in the game due to just its infancy as well. You know, if you get into a safe spot on in low sec, there is no scanning available at the moment, so no one can scan you down.
Yeah. So I asked earlier, I don't know if you heard. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we're fine.
Yeah.
Is the population better distributed in Echoes right now?
That's what it looks like, right?
Yeah, I've been throughout various different places in low sec. I have ventured out to null sec once, but I didn't really see any players out there. I think because of when I did it was quite new into the game. There are a lot of systems with 10, 50 players, like standard EVE. So I think the distribution is slowly spreading out. The interstellar delivery system, which is you paying more ISK to have something moved from Jita, for example, both by regional by NPC and interstellar by players, I think is a good system in that a player doesn't need to go to Jita to get a price. If it's suddenly if the item in Jita is 75% less, they can just pay for it to be moved, and it does close that gap obviously with the cost, but it does allow easier spreading than obviously earlier on. We won't have many people moving freight, things like that, so there is a lot more spread out just from the mechanics of the game.
Yeah, and we had just talked about things like push X and the frogs, right? You're not going to see something like that in Echoes really because of this feature. Because you have interbus, things like shipping is going to be really not necessary.
Are there concerns? Are there concerns about the game stepping in and taking over too much space in the sandbox like that?
No, because I still think you will see groups like PushX and things like and Frogs forming because there are still player-based contracts for courier. Deliveries outside of your region are done by players. I currently have a few that are outstanding because obviously I forgot that I was in Jita and it was locked. That I'm imagining there's a player somewhere in the world sat on his phone trying to jump through that Jita Stargate to deliver my courier.
Not to mention there's a limited number of ITCs in the whole game, so
yeah,
if you want something delivered that isn't an ITC.
Yeah, but it's just much more likely that people are going to internalize and do things themselves, right? When you can pretty much get it through the interbus stuff, at least closer to you than you effectively can in EVE Online.
It depends. If I'm in Glenty space, I can't do interbus from Jita. I can only do interstellar, which is player. Interbus only are doing inner region transport. They will not do out of region, so it will only do the Citadel into the Citadel. It won't do the Citadel into the Forge.
So to move something from one region to the other, I would have to interbus it to like a regional gate, a regional border, have a player jump it, and then I can interbus it across the region again?
You would have it moved into a interstellar region station. So there's specific stations they move from and to. Then it would be a player that goes to that station, will pick up your cargo, and then move it to that destination station. If I'm based in a station that's not part of that route, then I'll have to move it to that route myself or pay Interbus to do it. But you still have to travel to that system. You can't say if I'm in station X, I want stuff moved to Jita so I can then ship it to a MAR. You have to fly to Jita, then have it brought to you by Interbus. Then a player has to move it to a MAR.
Well, so this is great information, Sully. And if you guys want more information, we have channels at TIS. So come to our Discord. We have a whole section for EVE Echoes. Some of the most knowledgeable people that play the game are there. You can ask them further questions. The bigger thematic question to tie it into EVE Online is, how does this fit with EVE Online? Is this EVE Online?
It's a
or-
funnel. It's a funnel. It's an expanded tutorial with the ability to actually keep playing and have fun if you don't really want to scale up. But I do believe that quite a big chunk of the EVE Echo players will eventually port over to EVE Online, because it just adds that extra layer and extra complexity. So if that's what you want, that's definitely where you're going to end up.
I
So I
think
want
as
to
well.
start with some facts, though. So CCP has mentioned that the game is separate. So the lore will be separate. It's not going to be 100% the same as EVE Online's lore. There's a Convic's tweet about that. So it is a different game.
Mhm.
It is, universes will not be joined together. They are separate universes, and they're run by separate companies. So even though it has a lot of EVE philosophy and graphics and ships are in the game, it doesn't mean that the game of Echoes will match EVE Online's mechanics. Even as Echoes advances, they are meant to be separate games, and that's been stated by both NetEase and CCP. In terms of how they will progress, as Caleb mentioned, then we start entering a lot of player opinion. Will EVE Echoes become the funnel into EVE Online, or will EVE Echoes become the replacement to EVE Online? And those are different opinions and how
Well,
those games might progress.
to some people who want to play more casually in between parts of their life, will EVE Echoes be their final destination for that casual fix of science fiction?
I believe so. A few people that I've been playing with, they were EVE vets many years ago, but they stopped playing due to real life circumstances. One of them is a trucker who is always on the road, and so when he heard that EVE was coming to mobile, he was straight in. He was in the beta because he loved the game, but his real life circumstances didn't allow him to play it. So I think a lot more people that have those mobile lives or who don't have computer systems able to handle EVE Online will fall into EVE Echoes because it is that EVE fix in a mobile device.
I also
But
think
also-
that one of the really important factors is, if Echoes becomes a really good success, it might prove to CCP that they might benefit from moving some features or some access onto mobile devices, right? So you might see a lot of thinking out of the box and putting things like PI and things like that. Things that do not necessarily need the multiplayer aspect can be easily put on a mobile device. And I do hope that they consider doing that very, very soon. One would be, for instance, the market, right? Of course, it needs to be done right and balanced, but market and PI can definitely go on a mobile device. And that would help a lot on the things that you mentioned when you're on the road and you're not able to be at the client.
But also add that Echoes has several localizations that EVE Online does not. So in terms of transitioning players over, I think for English speaking users will be able to transfer over to EVE Online if they want to. But Echoes has some languages that aren't supported by EVE Online, like Italian, I think, is one of them. So we'll see what happens in that regard.
Yeah, they have 7 languages.
Yeah, I was looking at a streamer in Spanish, apropos,
Who's that?
that was doing, he had like 500 viewers. So it's definitely a big hint to CCP. Can we please get that Spanish localization fixed?
They have Portuguese too.
Yeah, I got a feeling that localization is going to spread for EVE Online. Just from the vibe I got from talking to CCP. I'm not saying they said anything at all. They were totally
Yes.
quiet.
Benefited a lot from the Korean localization.
Well, if you look at what Hilmar was talking about, he quoted this article about the adjacent user theories that is used by social media, and he said, "Here's the concept very well explained." And I read the article and did some more research on it. And what you're looking to do is say, we know we have this player. What about the guy next to him? What's keeping him from going lower into our funnel, let's say? And one of those is language barrier. So you look at it and you say, this guy likes EVE. He speaks English. He's in. This guy likes EVE. He speaks Spanish. He's not in. So what do we need to do to get that guy in. He's an adjacent user. Well, he's already bought into the concept. So all you need to do is offer him whatever is blocking him to be removed so that he can get in. And for a lot of people, that's language.
Yeah, and in this day and age, there's a funny thing that localization has become, in my opinion, a lot cheaper, right? With things like other games massively doing localization of all their games, so you can almost completely choose your native language, and you also have massive translations and dubbings of things like movies and series because of streaming services like HBO and Netflix and all that stuff, right? So the market for good localization has improved a lot, both in price and quality.
One of the other things to point out with languages is that there are people who learned English by playing Eve and having to talk to people, since even if they have a localization, most of the people they'll be talking to speak English primarily.
Yeah, but you need the entrance. You need the first step to be your native language, right? So you can build up and transition into using your English skills more and more, which is basically the lingua franca of the world these days, right? But you need to have the access first. If you're 13 years old in Spain, you're not necessarily going to be that good at English yet, but you will become really good. But you need to actually have access to a game and to work with the community, right?
There's also specialized languages, there's a lot of specialized language in EVE Online, and I don't think it's accessible, even if you're taking language classes in your home country. It's not your first language. It's going to be hard to understand what a warp drive might be.
Actually, a lot of the specialized language was it is the same across languages. Like I remember at one point in one of Pando's streams, he mentioned that it's not actually that hard to FC in two different languages at once, except for certain cases like Russians having a lot of their own distinct Eve slang.
Mm-hmm.
And well, during the big Lantern fights, I was listening in on the Siege Green comms, since we were coordinating with them, and a lot of us were also listening to their comms. And actually, most of it was English words mixed with Koreans, enough that I could pretty much tell what was being called.
Well, you also get voice inflection and stuff, so it's not written. You have some, I think I know Italian, I think I know Portuguese, but I'm not understanding the words. I'm understanding the words plus the emphasis.
Yeah.
And the speed. But yeah, I think, I lost my point, but there was something along the lines of people being able to FC in different languages. Oh, I know what it was. It was Russians. You went on to say Russians had their own terms for things. And that's a very interesting thing, because that's the problem with localization is, what do you agree on the translation to something like damage control is? Because it's not that easy.
I think the point is that you should really try to not translate those things too much, because terminology on specific lingo and things like that really doesn't opt well to a translation. It's too technical, so you should really keep it in the English terms, and then everything around it, of course, can be translated. This is very much like Japanese is really funny with this, and I think it's also Arabic. They import a lot of terminologies pretty much directly from English, but then the pronunciation is a little bit changed. That means that if you're listening to something like Japanese, depending on if they're talking about things like sci-fi, all the words will pretty much be in English, just made a little bit more Japanese sounding. And it's also because some terminologies don't actually exist in some languages, so you have to import them almost directly, right?
Yeah. They have their own separate alphabet I took Japanese a semester in community college, and they have like a whole separate alphabet just for foreign words for Japanese, which is kind of cool.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I agree and disagree as well with Caleb, because I think if you have a name of a planet, it's just kind of like, say it's Greek or something similar. Maybe you can keep that in its own language or whatever a specific name is for an alien race like Triglavians or whatever. But when it comes to conceptualizing invulnerability field, well, actually that's gone, or electromagnetic field, shouldn't that get translated?
No, I think it should be described and explained in the native language. It should not be directly translated, because it becomes a whole mess, and the slider just moves. What do you then translate and what do you not translate? And a lot of terminologies really don't translate well into native tongues. It becomes very artificial sounding and dumb. I'm a huge proponent of translating and localizing, but not when it comes to terminology, because it really starts messing things up, and it makes it much harder to then eventually do cross-language communication.
See, with Echoes, the localization has been an obvious thought since the beginning. Most notably, as I was saying before off stream, the orca is not referred to as an orca on Eve Echoes. It's called a humpback.
Lol.
And I believe that is because the localization on it was easier for humpback than orca. They are still in the same categorization of animal,
Species.
such as they're both whales, but I think it was easier for them to translate humpback than it was orca.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I think Americans do something similar with car types, and it's really bugging me. Every time I look for a car or talk cars with Americans, they have different names in US than they do in the rest of the world, which is really weird.
What do you mean, like a sedan?
No. That's a class of car. I'm talking about the actual brand. So if it's a Ford Focus or things like that, all these things have different names. And well, even the brand used to have I think a different name in at least in the UK, which is also very, very confusing. That's a Vauxhall instead. It's like, well, could you stick with one brand, please? And when you have a brand, each product should have the same name in the entire world. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, point is, localization has problems. It's not that easy to do, but Echoes seem to put 7 languages into their game. So maybe that work can be translated over to EVE Online proper, which would open up a lot of adjacent users to the game. And by the way, go ahead.
I know that for Echoes, they actually got members of their community they got volunteers to do the localization or help them out at least. So I hope CCP does the same thing here with EVE Online.
Yeah.
And this is really something that should be maybe even shifted into something like crowdfunded stuff, right? Pretty much like our mini games, and we should have a mini game option where we do crowdsourced translations. I think that would be a massive experiment, and it would really push things forward. I'd much rather sit and do translations than, say, do planet search or microscopic staining and things like that.
Maybe do a discovery. What do they call it?
Yeah, Project Discovery with languages would be
Linguistics.
really good thing. And the tools already exist, right? In crowdsourced translation tools, they already exist. So I don't see why CCP should not actually do that, and they could basically get everything translated. I think we need to do a lot more crowdsourcing, and it also comes on the whole wiki thing. I think should be reopened, and the wiki should be tied into all the explanation and stuff in the clients.
Mm-hmm. I have something else I want to move on to. If you guys are finished with Echoes, this might be interesting. It might not be. Do you guys want to talk about the investor report for Pearl Abyss?
Okay.
Yeah, I thought that was through. That was quite an interesting time that they released it as well, because that was after they said they had 5 million signups ready. So I think the next investment report that comes out, I think, be an interesting figure to view.
Yeah, let me grab Let me grab that. I have it around here somewhere. I get lots of things and I lose track of things quite often, but here it is. See if we can bring it up. It's a PDF. Oh, give me a second to like lag it in here. Have you seen this yet, Caleb?
What are you looking at?
The Q4 investor for, was it quarter?
Oh, yeah. I looked at the numbers of that. I thought you were going to go down and talk about the second mobile title that they seem to be working on. But yeah, the actual economics of Pearl Abyss looks really good, and EVE Online has grown 30% quarter on quarter, which is quite impressive. I think I used that in an argument with Cable the other day, because he kept saying, implying that CCP were doing bad, but they haven't been doing bad. They had a little bit of a dip, but other than that, they've pretty much been consistently growing. Of course, I do agree that it's a problem that they do this on what I call the cannibalized economy, where they're losing actual real players and they're increasing revenues from existing players. I think they should switch that around and focus more on getting new players. I think that's also what they want. It's just that their current design of the game has kind of stifled that and pushed us into just adding multiple accounts and credit card warrioring. I think we need to move beyond that.
Let's look at the numbers first. So EVE Online here has operating revenue up by 32% quarter over quarter. And you can see it jumps from 46 to 57%. And if you looked this same time last year, if you go year over year, it's up quite a bit, because we had like 36%, 34%, now up 57%. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's a consistent, nice growth.
Do we have any data that shows that there's a decrease in number of customers to support the theory that
that Caleb just put forward?
Yeah.
Yeah, prove it, Caleb.
I mean, is that like a gut feel, or is there do we have data that was shared with us that shows that we have less customers and revenues increased?
I think they actually did release those numbers once in a Vegas presentation, at least indirectly. But no, there's no strong data to support it. It's just knowing how the game works and knowing which people have actually left it. This is pretty much what I would conclude.
I don't know. It's hard. I mean, there's more people showing up. I saw 3,400 of the attackers in the first Keepstar, and that was greater numbers than the original Casino War. So that would be an indicator possibly that there's more players now, or there's more participants.
Well, that's engagement, right? And this is what I say with cannibalizing. You get the engagement from your existing player base, but you lose a lot. I think the best proof of my argument is Blackout. We know that a lot of people actually quit playing EVE at that point, but it didn't change anything about CCP's revenue, and it didn't even hit our PCU that hard. So that's really about the fact that it just scales laterally with multiple accounts and bots.
Hold on, I think it did hit the PCU. Let's back up. You can see that huge dip there. That's Blackout. That's a pretty big hit to PCU. Concurrent players. You're talking a 5,000 to 10,000 mark compared to what it was, or what it is now. It's about 30,000, 32,000. It was down to like 21, 25,000. That's
because we lost both engagement and we lost actual players. So it took a huge dip, but it recovered, and I would say that it mostly recovered with added accounts to existing players and to scales like bots.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I'm looking at this chart now, and you can clearly see the COVID bump. Right, it's that hump right there.
Yeah, it is. Which is again very much engagement, right? It's existing players that are just piling on. This is what you see in wars, and then you get the positive effect on the other side of wars is that you get an influx usually around when a war gets to the media and starts being noticed. It becomes the marketing for EVE Online, and then you usually get a nice influx of new blood just on the other side of a war.
So we're looking at the red marks here. These are the influxes of new players. These are accounts created, basically newborn players. And if we look at the last 6 months, you see that huge spike there, 15,000. Ooh, that's a huge spike. Those are probably the beginning of the war. Well, let's check the date. Yeah, yep, that's the beginning of the war.
Yeah, and again, in this war, I think we talked about this with Sully. There's a benefit to actually, when you decide to participate in the war, you can also benefit a lot from just rolling some alphas to support your activities and spread that out, and then you can eventually plex them. So I would have expected to see a plex price bump, but it's not actually materializing.
Well, here's some interesting look. You don't have, well, let's look at that 4-4. Yeah, you do. Kind of have a COVID bump here for new players. Coincides with this hump here. So people were trying it out. You have a giant spike for the beginning of the war. But look overall, this area here, that is a new normal. 6,000 to 7,000 people trying the game. I believe that's daily.
And I think we're going to see that trend continue, because Eve Echoes is definitely going to bring more eyeballs on the online. And again, back to the fact that for some reason the CCP is not really strongly pushing their marketing, and they're not really spreading it out in a way that can capture a lot of new blood, and they've never really done that. The prime marketing thing, of course, some of their really good videos when there was big patches, they pull in some attention. But other than that, it's really the big stories when they hit things like Financial Times or BBC or whatnot, and even, of course, when they get into the normal gaming journalism, right? IGN and whatnot. That's when you see these increases in people joining the game, because we are basically, as players, the marketing for you online. So I think we're gonna get more of that as we get more titles, because then the whole cross-pollination thing is definitely going to be a thing. This is also why I'm a huge fan of CCP doing product development and making new titles. And they're already rolling out another licensed title for mobile games, which is a 4X game. So that's also going to be very exciting.
What's 4X?
Well, it's a classification of a game type. It's basically it's an abbreviation that's basically explore, expand, exploit, exterminate.
Okay, another thing that's interesting. I didn't know they were developing a second mobile game, but it makes sense if they think that's where the future is, dictated by Korean players who have adopted long-term strategy games on a handheld device. The Western cultures haven't done that yet. Then again, they wore masks before we did.
Well, I think this is again one of those things where CCP might be trying to benefit from using the mobile platform almost as an experimental room, like an R&D room, where they're licensing a lot of the profitability to someone like NetEase, and then they're adding things and features and designs in there that can then be reused for EVE Online. That's my suspicion. I could be wrong, but something like a 4X, in my mind, would point towards an improved and expanded PI design concept, right? So I do see these things as almost R&D. And of course, CCP is also building their own big title, which is going to be a proper third-person avatar-based game. When that's going to be properly announced, I don't know, but it's basically all the ideas of their past experience folded into what is now what I would call the current standard of third-person games, right? And pretty much all of them, I think there's like at least 5 or 6 titles right now that are the big sellers, are all based on the same thing. It's these third person, running, shooting, exploring, RPG elements, stealth stuff, parkour climbing. And it's the same in all of them, whether you're talking Ghost of Tsushima, Horizon Zero Dawn, Assassin's Creed, hell, even The Last of Us, those games do similar things. They're all the same model. And I think CCP wants to do something similar and then use all their experience with Dust and do an MMO version.
Yeah.
That's the difference, right? None of these games have a functional MMO game, but CCP can do that.
And for people that want to do hauling, like Red Frog, you have Death Stranding.
Yeah, going back to what you said about Korean and MMO and mobile games, though, I don't think it's just an Eastern concept. If you were to include the Switch as a mobile game category, because you can play it while mobile, Switch has been hard to find in the U.S. That sort of game style is picking up in Western countries as well. So it's not just an Eastern concept.
But Nintendo games aren't strategy; they're more adventure and role play, and they're experimental and interesting, but they're not really long-term strategy, long-term deep, let's call it spreadsheet kind of strategic. You do a lot of offline calculating.
I think both CCP and NetEase needs to start thinking about this. How do you take advantage of big screen, small screen in the same game, right? The same product. How can you use big screens and small screens? And you mentioning the Switch is a good example. I think the Switch is too small, but some of the games on there really are great once you actually put them on the big screen. So how can you maybe do both? Have aspects of the game that is really good on the small screen. So I would mention something like secondary games, mini games, PI, stuff like that. And then when you actually want to play actively, you go on your big screen. How can you bridge that gap? How can you figure out how to do both with your title? I think that's going to be the big challenge for the future.
Can I speak to that for a moment? So my headset is dead, so if anyone speaks, it'll echo through. So I'll try to be brief. But that's what Caleb just said is kind of the spiel that I've been giving for ever now. The way to bring EVE Online to more than one platform is not to make another game, but to expand the amount of game modes, because EVE is not a game. EVE is like a clubhouse with a bunch of different games in it, and we all play different games at different times. Some of those port very well to mobile or console or desktop, and some of them don't. And we should be creating additional game modes. Some of them will be mobile exclusive, some of them console exclusive, some of them desktop exclusive, etc. But there's a lot of the stuff that we do now that will port over to one or both of those other platforms, and that is how EVE reaches those other platforms, smoothly.
Yeah, and this is basically a 2020 variation on what Unifex talked about with brand unification. How do you bring all these things together under an umbrella where you basically, instead of doing the cannibalizing of players in one title, you basically make them spend more money on all the other added products, right? Because there are game styles that I really like, and then there's game styles that I really don't like. I was ridiculed the other day with the fact that my kill boards are horrible. Well, that's because I play metagame and I play market stuff, right? But I also like a good avatar-based game, and I would have played Dust like a crazy person, even though I'm not that good at FPS. So I might have been killed continuously and hilariously, but I would still have been playing it because I like that type of game, and I am going to play that new title like a crazy person, that's for sure.
Okay, the other thing I wanted to look at here is revenue by IP. This is for Pearl Abyss. CCP is now a subsidiary or a part of Pearl Abyss, and you can see for the first time, EVE Online, it's usually at 12, mostly around 15. I can't say percent, but about 15. Are these measured in millions? Billion KRW. I don't know what that measurement is. I think that's
Korean currency.
Right, but what's the
conversion? For you the other day.
Korean won.
Yeah, what's the conversion though?
It's ridiculous. It's something like factor of 1,000. I think it's basically
so these
almost, are 1 to 1,000. It's
so billion.
The numbers you see further down in the actual budget breakdown, it's something like 5 billion isn't it? Or is it trillion? And then you have to actually take it down by a factor of 1,000, and you get the equivalent US dollar value.
Yeah, 18.9 is about $15.9 million.
That's what I thought. So these are about million factors pretty much. So anyway, it jumps from 14.6 to 18 or 19 actually in the second quarter. That's a big jump. It becomes a larger part of Prolibis's overall portfolio. And this is not counting Eve Echoes. So it's nice to see Eve is having a growth pattern, or maybe Black Desert's having a shrinkage pattern, but the percentage of Eve Online in Prolibis's portfolio has grown.
Yeah, they've basically taken a lot more of the actual share of profitability. Black Desert tanked a little bit, but I'm pretty sure that it's actually recuperated a lot of those losses. So they're back in what would be considered healthy. And as you mentioned, the NetEase stuff has not even shown up on these things yet. They are going to also take a big chunk, I think, especially considering that they're already rolling out a second title. So it's not just going to be one game, it's going to be 2 games within the next few years. And then you got the rollout of the new Avatar title, and then what Prolibis is doing in-house to expand on the whole Black Desert universe. I think you're going to see a lot of stuff coming out from these guys. This whole merger or purchase is actually really good. I think we talked about this way back when they actually did the purchase of CCP, that this could really become quite the growth for both parties, and I think this is what is being proven right now. You're seeing exactly some of these things happening.
Yeah, there's a lot of synergy. I know some people quit because a Korean company bought an Icelandic company and the culture's different and the way they transact for monetization is different. And there was a lot of fear about that. And some people stomped away. But we were very excited, as was CCP, to have a like-minded investor take an interest. Because instead of people trying to extract profit out of your company at the expense of your company, you have people who are buying into the same dream.
And it's slightly shy racism. I know that there's some argument to be made for, Eastern stuff is a little bit more aggressive, but it's mostly mythical and opinionated, right? And CCP now with Prolibis are spanning the globe quite nicely. They have a lot of activity and positions in America. They have a lot of positions and activity in Europe. Then they have Korea, and now with the collaboration of NetEase, they have China. So I think they're doing really, really good. I think they will be able to create their own little culture of almost a globalist mindset. So not a culture of its own that's going to be independent of the individual things. So when the Mitani likes to talk about what Icelandic culture is doing to how CCP do games, I don't think that's necessarily valid, and it's definitely not that valid anymore. They're very international oriented.
Yeah, it's looking at that Q2 number from this year to last year. That's a 26% increase from year over year. And that's a pretty decent increase. I think it's going to be interesting to see how does Echoes play into that. And I don't think we know how that IP is being licensed. Is it a one-time license fee, or is it based on number of subscribers or a percentage of the income that NetEase pulls in?
Yeah,
so I'm interested to see just how that works.
Well, in some ways, we don't
quarters as Echoes picks up.
In some ways, we don't really care, right?
Exactly.
The only thing we care about is this a living game or is this a dying game?
Well, it's more that even if it's a fairly bad deal with NetEase and you're not getting that much revenue back into Prolibis, it's still extremely brand value increasing, right? The brand value of CCP and Prolibis's IPs will grow exponentially because of the exposure. So it's almost okay to have almost no actual direct profit coming back to Prolibis from the NetEase titles, because as we can see, it looks like NetEase is already thinking of the next title, and I think they are handling a lot of the funding themselves and basically just saying, okay, we're going to make a second title and a third title and so on and so forth. And it is a bit of pump and dump, but that's the mobile platform and that's the market model and business model that NetEase is working on. and it still gets exposure and marketing for CCP and Black Desert and Pearl Abyss in general, right?
I might disagree, though. I think there is an element of we don't care about the company. We just want to know if the game is growing or dying. But there is also an element of you want the game company to be doing well. You don't want to be in a situation where a game is doing well, but the company is not. So I think not everyone will be concerned with how well CCP is doing, but I think some players would have a concern and a wish that CCP will do well.
We just want their budgets to do well. I don't care how much money Hilmar's making. Frankly, it's his business, but I just care that they're investing in a game. And what I care about is this the game I want to invest in with my time and my energy? Is this a good investment? Is this going to be around? Is this a growing universe or is it a dying universe? Is this am I rearranging deck chairs on a Titanic? What's the point of that? But look at this other thing here. I'm looking at the revenue by region. North America and Europe jumped up to like half of their revenue. What's going on there? That's definitely
coronavirus.
Entrance of EVE Online. Could be the coronavirus, right? Because Europe and the US got hit by it a lot harder than the Asian countries. Interesting.
Well, there's a lot of interesting things that are going to come out from this whole COVID thing. Also with the fact that, well, of course, some people have been hurt very hard by this, but other people have almost, I'm not going to say benefited, but they ended up with a lot of expendable money that they have no idea where to use because their purchases have gone down. They haven't been on vacation. All of the things that they usually spend money on has not been possible. So they have a lot of exposable money in their banks, and things like big car sales and game sales and things like that are definitely going to be coming out in October, November. In my point of view, I think you're going to see a lot of explosive spending.
So realignment from going out and eating or going out and entertaining yourself to staying at home and ordering some electronic entertainment, whether it be movies or video games.
Because all of that has been impossible, right? You've not been able to dine the way that you usually do. You haven't been able to go on a vacation. You haven't even spent your daily spending on things like Starbucks coffees and whatnot. All of these things are not active right now. So there's a lot of money in people's wallets that they have no idea what to do with.
Dr. Spod said, I just bought a stupidly expensive coffee machine.
It's not stupidly expensive. It's an amazing coffee machine, except for the fact that it is noisy, very noisy.
I would say the money or wallets really depends on where you are and
yeah, of course.
What your program looks like. It's a little different in the country I live in compared to Caleb.
Yeah, but like they're releasing our vacation money to stimulate our economy. So not only do we have in my country all the money that we've saved from not being able to actually go out and spend money, but we've retained our salaries, and now we're also getting this vacation money that's usually locked up for vacation purposes. All of that is going to come out in big chunks. So I would say that more than 50% of the population has massive amounts of money that is going to hit the economy very soon.
Speaking of economy, I'm expecting a call that I've got to take. So do you guys want to continue to talk, or should we wind it up? We've been at it about an hour since the show went back up.
I'm fine with both.
Anybody got any burning desire to cover a topic? All right. Well, this has been Talking in Stations, where we discuss all kinds of things. You're welcome to join us anytime. Talking in Stations Discord. If we can find a link for that. What do I do to prompt that? I think
Talking in Stations, the wired Ethernet edition.
Do I hit Discord? No, there's some kind of command I can do. But I don't remember it. We will see you tomorrow if we have a special show on Saturday. If not, we'll see you Sunday for the Sunday show. And in case you haven't listened to the podcast, You can find it by name, Talking in Stations. It was a great episode last week when we had Boat on. A lot of fun. It's a 2.5 hour ride, and it felt like a half hour. It was so fast.
And hopefully we're going to get the second episode of Wormhole stuff tomorrow.
Well, I think that's actually going to be every few weeks, but we'll see. We definitely are going to have a consistent Wormhole show now, so that would be good. So anyway, for you guys that are out there, make sure to support us on patreon.com/Matterall, or give us a review on wherever you see us, and help us get some more visibility. And then hang out in our Discord. It's Talking in Stations Discord. And we will see you tomorrow. Let's see if we can do a raid real quick. I don't think we can. So I can't raid from in here. So okay, we will see you guys tomorrow. Take care.